Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I think I know just about everybody on here, so I won't bore you with anything about me, but we'd like to welcome you for our very first Connecting Over Conversations Lunch and Learn that Women United has put together. So this will be one of many that we'll be doing. And Maggie Harris is our presenter, and I'm going to give you a few highlights about Maggie, though we did include her comprehensive bio in the information to register for this webinar. So she comes from a women-dominated family, and as she likes to call it, a bunch of strong vocal women. She realized approaching the second half of her life that she wanted to take charge and do something different. So who's in that boat? I am. She left an extremely successful 30-year advertising and marketing career, burnout from her high-powered role and trying to keep up with the Joneses, driven by ego, and now more with the mind and body connection, hence her love of yoga. She utilizes her strengths, which has played a big part of her decision in starting her own business at age 52. She loves to help others learn, and she's going to dive in to her strengths and share with us how we can leverage our own. Now let's welcome Maggie, and as she encourages us to leverage our own strengths.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. I am so excited for this. I bopped out of bed at like 5:30 this morning. When's it going to start? When's it going to start? So I am really, really excited to be here. And thank you for that introduction. And I just want to elaborate a little bit. I was in this career for 30 years that my mindset was, I can't do anything else. I'm stuck here. And through a series of life events that all seemed to collide at the same time in 2016, I ended up leaving and just kind of taking stock of everything. My stepdad got very ill. My mom was struggling to take care of him, and so on and so forth, lots of things. And at the time I lived, I grew up in Akron, Ohio, as it said in my bio. I had moved here in 1981 with my family. I moved back to Ohio. And it was when all this was happening that I made the decision to come back here where most of my family is. And yes, they are very strong-willed women, very just amazing women. And the reason what happened was I realized I can do whatever I want. And I've been working with this tool, with the StrengthsFinders tool, since 2002. I was part of a team that introduced it at R&R Partners when I worked there. And I loved it. And it was my favorite thing to do. And as I got promoted up the ladder at the agency and became a partner, I realized I was getting promoted out of what I did well, out of the things that I naturally did well. And I gained weight. I drank too much wine. I wasn't exercising. I wasn't a very nice person. I told Krista this. It was very much to me about the house and the car and the purse, and all those things. And I just sort of realized that shit doesn't matter, and so I decided to become certified and start my own business, and that was almost 4 years ago. Well, it was 4 years ago, and I had no clue what I was doing, none. But you know what? You ask a lot of people for help, and they are more than willing to give it. And I learned a lot this journey. I've learned so much about myself and so much about the amazing people that are in this community, where we are all fortunate enough to be. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and I told Krista, I'm a very open book. So if you have any questions at all, unmute and ask, or put them in the chat, and we'll definitely address them. Let me do this. So I entitled this "What's Right with You," largely because from the time we're very small, the focus, and this is largely because of the way our brains are, this is largely neurologically driven. We focus on the negative, right? It's that part of the brain that is that senses danger, that's always looking for what's wrong, to be prepared to fight it, right? So this idea of focusing on what's right with you is something that is really difficult for some people to do. It's really difficult for most people to do. And today, I hope that you leave this knowing and understanding and embracing how critical it is for you professionally and personally to try to change that mindset into focusing on your strengths. I found this quote the other day and I fell in love with it for two reasons. Number one, it's a beautiful quote. We are each gifted in a unique and important way. It is our privilege to discover our own special light. And I love that word. It's our privilege. You know, we don't have to do this. We get to do this. And I love the whole idea of special light, because I'm very connectedness is my number 5 strength. And I feel very connected with the universe. And I feel like people who are in their strength zone, who are doing what they do best every day, they have a light around them. They shine. And I often tell my daughter that. I said, you know, you shine. You absolutely are this beam of light when you're doing what you do really well. And I also love it because it's the quote is from a woman named Mary Dunbar. And Mary Dunbar, raise your hand or unmute if you've heard of her before. So I hadn't, but I loved the quote and I decided, okay, I want to look her up. Well, she was an artist and a writer in the UK. She died in 1960, but one thing she was well known for was sort of chronicling the growth of women becoming a more stronger and a greater voice in the world. And I really loved that, because I thought, okay, this is someone, you know, I wish I would have been able to meet at some time. So I love that quote. So I'm trying to get this thing to work. I seem to struggle with this whole thing of, there we go. How many of you, let me see if I can, how many of you are, and I know some of you are because we've talked about it, are familiar with Clifton Strengths or StrengthsFinder? And you can just put in the chat box if you want. Or you can say me. Okay. Let me just look in the chat box real quick. Not familiar, long ago, heard of it, but not very familiar. Yes, I am familiar. Okay, that's good. I knew we'd have kind of a mix of people, and that's actually really good. So Clifton Strengths was developed in the mid-70s era, when the idea of positive psychology was being it was really when that all started. And a gentleman named Don Clifton was at the forefront of that effort. He was a psychologist and a business executive. At the time, he had his own analytics company, and it was later, not much later, but purchased by Gallup. And most of you know Gallup, the polling company. What you probably don't know about Gallup is it's the largest analytics organization in the world. They literally poll 98% of the world every single day. It's mostly on things like how hopeful are they? Do they feel they're better, you know, than they were? Those kinds of things. So they have an enormous pulse on kind of where the world is going emotionally. And they're a really bad marketing company, which is why I think so many people haven't heard of Clifton Strengths, because it's just they don't even have a marketing department. So but they're a huge organization. Part of the reason it's important to point that out is because they are very, very analytics and data driven. So there's a lot of data behind this psychology behind managing with your strengths, leading with your strengths. But what Don Clifton did is, when they started all of this, he and his team asked the question, what will happen when we think about what is right with people rather than fixating on their weaknesses, right? So you think about it, you're in school, you're in grade school or high school, and you come home and you've got, and this was me, I would have really good grades in writing, reading, and language arts, and I was okay in history, but science and math were not my thing. And luckily, I had a pretty progressive mom, but in most, and this is true of a lot of the school systems throughout the country, it's a homogenized approach, right? You have to be good at everything. And if you're really good at this stuff, just put it on the shelf and double down how much time you spend on the stuff you're not good in, which is really kind of a 180 from what works, right? Because you take away a child's greatest opportunity to be successful. Yes, they still have to be able to pass the classes, and they still have to manage the things that they are not naturally gifted in. And I remember my mother, bless her heart, she said, look, just keep doing the writing and reading, and we'll figure out a way to manage through the science and the math, because it's clearly not going to be what you do in your life. You need to know the basics, but really put your energy into what you're really, the things you do very well. And you know, for a mom in the 70s, that was pretty unusual, but she was pretty unusual mom, just say that. So yeah, but if you think about it, that's exactly how we grow up, and it happens at work all the time, right? You have these, you know, these annual discussions, which I hope most of you are no longer doing annuals, reviews, and you're doing ongoing conversations, because that's so much more effective. But it's, you know, we do the sandwich, right? Oh, you know, you did this thing so well. Here's all the things 8 months ago, 6 months ago, 4 months ago that you need to work on because you did them really poorly. And then, oh yeah, but you did this well. So it's the sandwich. That's how we do reviews, right? And it doesn't work, because, you know, you have to look at the lens through why are they not performing these things well? Maybe that's not their strengths. How do I help them as a manager or a leader, as a coach? Because that's truly what managers are. How do I help them manage those areas, right? And you know, that is starting to change in a lot of organizations, and it's all about employee engagement. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But I also want to emphasize what Clifton Strengths is not. It's not a personality test. All right. So many of you have done MBTI, Myers-Briggs. That's much more of a personality test. It's not a values assessment. There is a values assessment out there that I really like called VIA, and it aligns very closely with strengths, I have discovered, because your values will come to you from your natural talents, right? But we also know values can change over time and experience, where strengths are much more unlikely to do that, or talents, I should say. It's not an IQ test, and I can verify this because I have worked with a couple of Mensa groups, and they were blown away by this information, right? Because it's so much more emotionally intelligent than IQ. Having said that, it is also not emotional intelligence test there, and I wouldn't even say test because it's not a test; it's an assessment. It is, however, an incredibly valuable tool, and can be incredibly valuable in terms of the first step of emotional awareness, which is self-awareness, right? So really understanding yourself. And a big part of that, when you take a strengths assessment, is also many of the assessments, we can now do a full 34 with all 34 themes in order. You can see where you are. You can also learn to let go of the things where you don't have natural talent, where there is not a basis for growth for you, and understanding that's okay, right? And that's hard for us. It's hard for us as women. And I know there's a man on here, maybe one or two, but it's hard for women because we are expected to not only sacrifice everything for everybody else in our lives, because if we're not doing that, we're not good, but we're expected to be, you know, we have to be good at everything, right? And it's just exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. But it is, like I said, a really good tool and on your journey for emotional intelligence. It's not a communication style assessment, so it's not DISC. However, it works very well with DISC. And I don't know if Amy Hunter is on the call or not, but we've worked, you know, she does DISC. She's the DISC master. And, you know, we've talked a lot about this, about, you know, these things can work really, really well together. but don't mistake them for being competing assessments. And lastly, it describes how we do things based on our natural talents. It's how we do things. In any assessment, when you get your assessment back, a lot of people use the terms as labels. So we have to be really, really careful that when, if you take the assessment and you get it back, that it's not labeling you. And I bring, I know that Krista has positivity and I have positivity, but we also have other things in our top 5 that influence how that looks like. So it's going to show up differently in both of us. And for anyone who's interested, this is what a full 30, I got to cover up the person's name. This is what a full 34 looks like, the report, and it's like 21 pages long, and it's really fascinating. Okay, so I'm going to ask everybody to unmute because I have a couple of questions to ask you, and I want you to say me when if you in fact do this. So, all right. How many of you talk to people at the grocery store, the airplane, elevator, and wherever you go?
Me.
Me. And this is, by the way, my caveat is that these questions are pre-COVID. Okay. I still do it. I still do it everywhere I go. I've made very good friends at the grocery store. How many of you have a color coordinated or extremely organized closet?
Me.
Not me.
Not me.
Guys, or I was going to say, or workspace, because like right behind me is so staged, and my desk right here, I've got like water over here. I got my computer cleaner rag over there. It's, but you got to put up appearances, right? How many of you make a list of things to do and actually do them even on the weekend?
Me.
Not me.
Not me.
How many of you, if you've done something that's not on the list, you put it on and you completed it, you put it on the list just so you can check it off? I literally did that this morning and I was laughing at myself. How many of you ask a lot of questions?
Me.
Me.
I don't.
And it's okay if you don't. How many of you need to pick someone to race while driving?
Not me.
Sometimes.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not me.
I would say for me, it's more of I have to pick a pace car, especially when driving to California.
No, I'm the pace car.
Yeah. That is so funny. Yeah, I have a funny story. My sister is a freak, but I love her. And she has all these animals, and she raises mini horses and dwarf horses to be therapy horses here in Las Vegas. And a couple of weeks ago, she bought a new dwarf horse. And I mean, they're like this big, they're adorable. And we had to go pick it up in Barstow. So I said I would go with her. And so we got in her custom made transit van that has a custom ramp, and we're driving to Barstow. And it was so great, first of all, just to get out. And second of all, to spend the quality time with my sister. And, but she drove me crazy because she was in the left lane the whole time, not even aware of the people behind her who were so pissed that she wouldn't move into the right lane so they could pass her. And I was like, I'm driving on the way home. This is unacceptable. So that just made me think of that. Okay, last but not least, how many of you push the button to remind the elevator that you are there?
Me.
There's actually a word in the dictionary for this, and even the people from Mensa didn't know what it was. And I keep saying I'm going to look it up, but I haven't. So those are really fun things to do. But what they really are a glimpse into what your talents are, right? So if the people who talk to people wherever they go, probably I have high woo or communication or includer or something along those lines. And the way that Gallup defines talent is the naturally recurring pattern of thoughts, feelings, or behavior. And I always laugh. I always feel like I can see all these people in a conference room spending months crafting each word, for this, right? But the way I define it is, these are your gifts from the universe, right? These are the things that have shown up in you probably from the time you were 4 years old, because they're largely cemented by the time you're 4 years old, right? So For example, I have harmony, positivity, maximizer, developer, connectedness, empathy, communication, woo, input, and arranger. Those are my top 10. And so I'm an outgoing person, right? And I remember when I was like 5 years old, my parents would have their, their little cocktail, their dinner parties, and there were five of us kids. So we're all, running around, and they'd all be standing around, and my dad would have me do this thing where it was just like a funny little song I sang. And God, the energy I got from that. And I remember I couldn't wait to do it. And afterwards I'm like, when can I do that again? And it just filled me up. Right. And I remember, I was talking to my sister about this a couple of years ago, my younger sister and even my older sister. And they're like, no way would we ever do that. We would hate that. That would make us throw up. No way could we ever get up and do that. And it just shows you, that you can really, what I call strength spotting these things. If you really think about, maybe you were someone who always, if you have that totally neat closet, maybe you were someone who always was organizing things, right? Just not even thinking about it. And that's the thing about talent. What makes it so powerful is it's so natural, right? But the problem that people have with embracing it is they take it for granted. They say, well, that's not a talent. Anybody can do that. But it's just not true, right? It's just simply not true. And Gallup, when they deliver the report, there's two reports. There's one that's a top 5, and they do that because research has shown that is a number that people can wrap their heads around. They can really wrap their heads around the concept. But it's really about your 10, 11, 12 that top 10, 11, 12 that are the ones that are always you. And that's why I wanted you guys to have that printout, because if you aren't familiar with this, at least you know what the 34 different themes are, and you can try to self-diagnose, if you will. I can't remember what other reason why I was going to say that, but what they really are is your potential, right? Because you've just discovered them. It doesn't mean you're automatically strong in those areas. It means, and we're going to talk about that, it means that's where your greatest potential is, right? Now that you know that, now that you know where you're strong, then you can learn how to turn it into a strength. Our talents describe us, right? So I'm a very positive person. I have positivity, right? They influence our choices. And by that, I'll give you an example. There are 2 strengths that it's very unlikely they show up together. They're harmony and command. And they both have the same goal. Harmony wants to come to resolution, right? They want everything so we can move on, right? Command also wants resolution, but it's your choice of how you go about getting that. So someone with harmony, for example, may want to sit down and say, okay, where can we come together, right? And someone with command can say, we need to make a decision by 12 o'clock. And if we don't, here's how we're going to move forward, and that's, I don't have high command at all. So that may play out a little bit differently, but it does influence how, the choices on how we do things. And I guess that is I can tie that back to the choice I made to not go back into marketing, because it was sucking the life out of me, because I wasn't able to be in my strength zone at all anymore. So it does influence our choices. It directs our actions, right? Not dissimilar to the example I just gave you. It explains why we are better at some things than others. It explains why I could go from a marketing career to a speaking career with much more agility than someone else who didn't have my top 5 strengths might be able to, or my top 10 strengths might be able to. Now, yes, I still have to invest in it and practice and still work really hard at it and critique. But the leap was so much easier for me than it might have been for someone like my sister, who's much more introverted and really doesn't like to get up in front of people, even though she was a reporter at Channel 3 for a number of years. She hated the part where she had to be on camera, but she loved all the rest of it. They help us filter our world. So this is really important right now, because we're all filtering a lot of really bad stuff right now. So one of the things and I hear this all the time from everybody, from both sides, we just need to come together, right? But a huge part of that is understanding and respecting that people don't filter the world the same way you do, right? And it's very unlikely that they're going to budge that much with how they filter. Now, there's definitely some, there's some people who definitely, will during this. And I'm not just talking about the election. I'm talking about all of the things that are happening right now. But it's how we see the world. It's literally like a filter that we hold up when we see the world all around us. So it's really important to understand, to recognize, and to, if you can, embrace that people filter the world differently from you. This is a source of a lot of conflict in the workplace, is understanding and appreciating that, having that emotional intelligence. And our talents are the greatest source of our best opportunity for excellence. Then I'm going to show you an example of that, case study on that in just a moment. Our strengths are different. Our strengths are the ability to consistently produce a positive outcome through near perfect performance in a specific task. Again, something that took months to, a statement that took months to perfect in a conference room. I define strengths as your superpowers. They truly are the innate, natural things about you that help you be the best version of yourself. And Krista, I can't remember if I told you this. I think my goal is, before I die, for us to have a strengths-based world. And the reason why is because if we are all the best version of ourselves, can you imagine what the world would be like? And if you take it on a small scale, if everybody in an organization is the best version of themselves and is able to do what they do best every day, the metrics and the data around tying that to really important KPIs, productivity, absenteeism, profitability, accidents in the workplace, turnover. I mean, the data is there. It's indisputable. But can you just imagine what a great world that would be? And I know that's a lofty goal, but I'm going to fight the good fight. So does anybody know who that is a picture of?
Yes, Vince Lombardi.
Vince Lombardi. So really interesting story about Vince Lombardi. And some of this so when I was on the Mensa call, I kind of messed this up. So one of the guys afterwards, emailed me after and corrected me on how wrong I was about what I said about Vince Lombardi. So I wrote it out a couple months ago, and now I can't find it because I do not have a very neat desk right now, but I remember it. So Vince Lombardi was the coach for the Green Bay Packers in the 50s. And he took the team to 3 Super Bowls. I don't know how many championships, but 3 Super Bowls, like the first, the second, and another one in his tenure there. And one of the things that he did as a coach, one of the tools that he did is when the teams would come in on Mondays, the players would come in on Mondays and watch films about their performance in the previous game, he would have them focus on the plays where they produced a positive outcome through near perfect performance in a specific task. Now this was long before strengths and any of this kind of talk, but that was one of the things that he did is I knew it was going to happen. He had his players focus not only on individual performance where they performed very, very well, but also as a team. And the reason why is, number one, when you acknowledge someone has done something very, very well, they are significantly more likely to replicate that behavior. And number two, put your energy in what you already do well, and you're going to get exponentially better, right? And there's quite a few things that actually prove that. I'm trying to think of. Right. So he had them really just replicate those things, and the team just got better and better and better. And if you think about it, as managers, as leaders, we are coaches, right? Our goal, how many of you lead people? Right. So
I do.
Okay. So our goals as people leaders are to encourage them, write them when, first of all, understand where they have natural talent and help them invest in that talent. Write them when they go off the rails a little bit, encourage them, give them the tools to succeed, and be there for them, right? And acknowledge their successes, right? That's what coach does. Teachers tell you how to do it. Teachers will say, do it this way. And there need to be teachers. I don't, that's very important, but managers are really much more, should be much more like coaches. But taking talent to strength takes an investment. It takes time. If you do the Clifton strengths, it means you spend time with your assessment results and really dig in. You have to continue to develop them, right? Because they're just going to grow dormant in your body if you don't develop them, and build your knowledge base around them, right? So one of the things, like, for example, when COVID started, I know myself well enough to know that it was a challenge to my positivity. And it was also, my daughter was here. My daughter has futuristic number 6, and it was a huge challenge for her. A, given her age, B, given her strengths makeup, is to not know what was going to happen, to not know when she was going to go back to New York, to not know what was going to happen to the apartment. And I think anybody would worry about that, but she was amplified. So I took a class online, a free class at Penn State or University of Pennsylvania Business School, which is very famous. I can't remember the name of it. It was a free class on resilience. So I invested in something that I knew would help bolster my positivity and my connectedness, and would make it easier for me to help my daughter, right? So that's just an example of the kinds of things that you can do. And then they become strengths, but it's not an end game. It is an ongoing lifetime thing of really understanding yourself and saying, okay, what do I need to bring to this meeting? What do I need to dial up? What do I need to dial down? Or being reflective and saying, wow, that went really, really well. What was I doing? How was I doing something that made it go so well? And as a coach, those are a lot of the things that I ask my clients to do, are be very reflective, be very specific, and then be very intentional. And it takes time, right? But it's well worth the effort. This is a study that the University of Nebraska did for effective, I keep meaning to change this. It's effective techniques for speed reading, not teaching speed reading, for speed reading. And what they did is they took 2 groups. They took a group of average readers, and then they took a group of above average readers, and they had them take a speed reading test. And the first test, without any training or anything, the average readers could read 90 words per minute, and the above average readers could read 350 words per minute. So they took each group and they put them through identical training, speed reading training, identical length of time, and had them come back and take a second test. So the average readers went from 90 words per minute to 150 words per minute. So they definitely improved. Where do you think, and you can unmute yourselves, where do you think the above average readers ended up? Doubled. So 700 words per minute. Anybody else?
Don't know.
3 times the amount.
I think they stay the same.
I agree. Same.
They went to 2,900 words per minute.
Oh my God.
And
How is that even possible?
well, 2 things. First of all, this is not to scale. And I suck at Excel. That is one of those things I have to admit is never going to be a strength, because I don't have analytical or deliberative or all those things that, you got to have to use Excel. So it is out of scale. How is that possible? Because when you invest in areas where you have talent, your potential for growth is exponential. It is really the only place you can grow. When we look at weaknesses or things that are towards the end of your report, right, your assessment, it's like trying to make a cake where there's no ingredients, trying to drive a car with no gas. Yes, you may be able to do them, but it's going to be harder. It's going to kind of suck the life out of you. And it's you're more prone to making mistakes, right? And so that's like, it's kind of the process I finally went through, is said, you know what, I'm doing all these things that I hate, and I'm not good at it. I'm making mistakes. I'm miserable. What's going on? I got to fix this. I got to figure out how to get out of this and get into a space where I know I can soar. You know, I know I can be this best version of myself. So that's how it's possible. People who know their strengths and have the opportunity to use them at work are 6 times as likely to be engaged in their jobs. And people who know their strengths and have the opportunity to use them at work are more than 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life. So I think of this as a Venn diagram, where this is engaged in their jobs and this is a quality, excellent quality of life. And that space in the middle, that's the work-life balance, you know, that we all call. That's kind of the best place, is when those things are both aligned. We feel safe in both areas. We feel supported in both areas, and you know, being in a strengths-based organization or a job or whatever can really, really help those things. So we're going to talk a little bit more about employee engagement in just a minute. People, I got to minimize this so I could read this. People who use their strengths every day have 8% greater productivity. Now that's on average. That number actually I've seen it as high as almost 50% in some organizations, probably because they were really low productivity number. But 8% is a pretty darn good increase. And teams that use their strengths every day have experienced 12.5% greater productivity. So, the thing about employee engagement is, I mean, we've all heard that expression, right? And I think a lot of people liken it to employee satisfaction, and they're absolutely not the same things at all. They are very, very different. And the person can be very satisfied at work because they come in at 9:30, then they go to do their fantasy football, and then they have a really long lunch, and then you know, they get the minimum amount of work done. What employee engagement is about is having an emotional connection to the work and to the workplace and to the brand for which you work. Right now, and this is gone up consistently over the last 20 years. Gallup's been measuring this since 2000. Every 2 years, they do an employee engagement study with thousands of people all over the world. And they do breakdown by the United States and, you know, by all the countries and everything, by gender, by all kinds of things. But essentially 34% of Americans, 34.5, self-report being actively engaged at their work, right? So those are your top performers. Those are the ones who do have that emotional connection to the work that they're doing. And, you know, I just realized my good friend, Dan Held, is on this. And Dan, I always think about your organization. So Dan and I worked way back in my old days when I was in marketing. Dan works for a production company, an amazing production company that in New York on Long Island. And, you know, a couple of the people, including Dan, was so engaged in their work, and it showed. It really showed in the work that they did, and it showed in our relationship and how we worked together. It didn't feel like work, right? And some of the things that his company, ADM Productions, has produced are just phenomenal. And you know, I think it's one of the reasons his company, who basically produced huge in-person events, pivoted so beautifully and so quickly when COVID hit to kind of change their specialty and to continue to be successful. So I think about Carol all the time when I think about someone who's terribly engaged, and you can tell her that, Dan. So the other side of that is 50% are disengaged. So those are the people who are, they're just showing up, right? They don't have an emotional commitment, and they're just showing up and, you know, punching their time clock, literally or figuratively. And they're kind of, you know, they're kind of your greatest potential to move to be actively engaged, but they're also very likely to be the ones who can be sucked into the highly disengaged, right? Because they're influenced by the highly disengaged, which is around 19% of employees, which that number is going down largely because there's so many organizations that are becoming strengths-based. And including, by the way, almost 1,000 colleges and universities, which is really great. So that's a really great age to introduce this to individuals and organizations. But they're the ones who are they're the pot stirrers. They are the ones who are out there writing really bad things about your organization on Glassdoor. They're the ones who are telling their family and friends how awful the organization is, how awful the leadership is. They are a poison to an organization and to your brand. They can destroy your brand. So actively disengaged, almost 20%, is pretty significant still. So we'd like to bring that number down. When an employee, why employees engagement, and I forgot that this was in here. Some of these stats that I talked about before, it's a 10 to 19% increase in sales, 14 to 29% increase in profit. These are averages, obviously. 3 to 7% higher customer engagement, 6 to 16% lower turnover in low turnover organizations, 26 to 72% lower turnover in high turnover organizations. They show up to a 15% improvement in engaged employees. And for those who are more manufacturing, 22 to 59% fewer safety incidents, right? So these are things that can be directly tied to employee engagement, right? And employees become much more engaged when they are in a position to do what they do best every day. People who are working in their strength zones look forward to going to work. They have more positive than negative interactions with coworkers. And I want to elaborate a little bit on this one. Negative interactions with coworkers, also conflict, assumptions, judgment, can be largely mitigated when you understand what the other people on your team bring to the team. When you understand what their strengths are, and you have conversations around using this common language, and you have conversations, and instead of being annoyed by the fact that, and I'll use a coworker that I absolutely love from way back, that Carrie always said, stop, we need to put this in a spreadsheet. And I'd be like, my head's gonna explode. If you know that person brings value, oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that, brings value to the team versus getting annoyed by it. I mean, if you completely change your assumptions and your judgments about a person, you're going to have more positive interactions than negative interactions that are driven by judgment and assumptions. People working in their strength zone treat customers better. This is kind of a no-brainer, because obviously when you are the best version of yourself, you're going to feel a lot better working with your clients and customers. It's just a natural connection. They tell their friends they work for a great organization. This is really, really important. About 2 years ago, I was at a birthday party for a friend, and I didn't know everybody there. And one of the women I met, she had a young daughter who was in her 20s. And I was really interested in talking to her because I have a daughter the same age. And I asked her what she did. And she told me she worked at 3 Square. And I tell Valerie Kimball this all the time. She works at 3 Square. And I said, oh, I've heard of that. I don't think that was here when I lived here the first time. Tell me about it. And she went on for about 20 or 25 minutes about what an amazing organization it is, how much she loves her job, how strong leadership is, all the things they're doing for the community. And I will forever have such high regard for that organization because of the things that she shared with me. And they do great things. And I don't know if anyone on the call has anything to do with them, but that is a perfect example of how that 25 minutes of her talking about what a great experience, how engaged she is there, and what a great organization is, that's the impact it can have on their brand. As we saw in the earlier slides, they achieve more daily. They have more positive, creative, and innovative moments. So we don't all have the opportunity. I don't know about all of your organizations, but not everybody has an opportunity or the finances to take the Clifton Strengths Assessment, although it is not an expensive assessment. So sometimes it's you can kind of spot things or have have questions. Oh, the trash is coming. I hope you guys can't hear the trash man out there. Oh God, I forgot about that. Anyway. Sometimes if you have conversations with people around these 5 clues to talent, it can really help you identify where they have and them identify where they have natural talent. The first one is yearning. So yearning is kind of what I talked about when I was talking about when I was 5, and I said to my dad, I love that so much. When can I do it again? So I really just couldn't wait to do it again. And I often feel like my life right now is everything I have to do between when I get to facilitate or I get to coach, because I love doing that so much. So yearning, and think about this about yourself. What are the things you do at work or outside of work that you really can't wait to get to? Do you really just want to get in a room, shut the door, and go through a bunch of data? Then, you probably have analytical and deliberative and strategic. So kind of thinking through those things. Rapid learning is a really good clue. And the thing about rapid learning is not just learning it, but it's also not really being able to explain it to other people very well because it comes so naturally to you. And that is like, I think about my sister and I were laughing the other day because I never read instructions, right? I just figure out how to do things. And she's like, no, because if you don't, here's what happens. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. This is not my area, right? But she's different. Like I don't read instructions and I screw things up. She doesn't read instructions and she figures out how to do it. She just redid her whole kitchen and has all these like new Wolf appliances for steaming and bleaming and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, today's the day I figure out how to use all the appliances. And I'm like, I would rather have a root canal than sit there and do all that. But she did it and she mastered it. There's a flow to it, right? So it seems easy. It's not bumpy. You don't get agitated. You don't get anxious, right? There's a real flow. And again, these are conversations you can ask, you can have with people and say, tell me about a time when you felt like you were doing something and it just flowed, right? And that's when you can really kind of dig in. Glimpses of excellence. And I mentioned this before, for a manager or even a peer, when you see someone doing something really, really well, a glimpse of excellence, make sure and tell them, even if it's already their job, tell them, because as I said, they are significantly more likely to replicate that behavior. And also, how many of you have ever had a time where you're like, wow, I crushed that. You're in your strength zone. You're in your strength zone. And it's not just at work, it's with anything. Satisfaction, right? Achievers, and Krista is an achiever. She will have satisfaction if she got everything done on her list at the end of the day. Then she can exhale. I can see you laughing. But satisfaction, right? Like for me, it's when I do something like this and someone says to me, wow, I want to learn more, or that was great, I learned this. And, to me, if I won a lottery, I would still do this because I want to see people change the way they view themselves and others. So those are the 5 clues to talent. I have more in-depth document on this that also includes kind of questions you can ask people. So if anyone is interested, just let Krista or Laurel know, and I'll get your email and we'll get it to you. So are there any questions on the 5 clues to talent? Ooh, gosh, we're running out of time. Okay, so one more thing. We talked a little bit about weaknesses. So I just want to note that weaknesses are very unlikely to become strengths. They're, like I said, you just don't have a framework for it, but they can be managed with awareness and intention. So some of the strategies are, and I've done every single one of these: develop partnerships with others whose strengths complement your weaknesses. I very often, one of the reasons Amy Hunter and I work so well together is she has high analytical, high responsibility. She's very high executing. and I'm very high relationship building. And we have discovered in the years that we've worked together that it is a really, and because we know this about each other, and we can say, you go do that because that's your thing and I'll do this. We just work really seamlessly together. Consciously develop ways to reach your goals using your dominant themes. If you have done Clifton strengths, right? So I don't have a lot of strategic thinking themes in my top 10, but I was director of strategy at the ad agency. So I had to find ways to use my dominant themes to be successful in that role. Hire people to do the things you don't do well. I will never, ever do my own taxes, no matter how easy they might be, because I hate doing them. I will probably make a mistake and end up in jail and owe hundreds of thousands of dollars to the government, which is impossible because that would mean I'd have to make a whole lot more than I do. Research to see if there is a way to leverage technology. A really big part of my job is having to use Excel. And I discovered a company that for Gallup certified strengths coaches, which I am, they have a tool that all I have to do is input data like names and your strengths, and they can create unbelievable Excels, charts, graphs, all kinds of things that I literally suck the life out of me. So there's a lot of technological solutions out there for things that we struggle with. And lastly, if you're in a role where you did not have the opportunity to use your strengths, reevaluate your role. Or if you're a leader of someone, and this has happened to me so many times, you guys, as a manager and a leader, where you see someone who's just really struggling. And we were a strengths-based ad agency. And so I knew what this person's, the example I'm thinking of, what her strengths were, but she was just in the wrong role. And once we made the changes we need to make, she soared. She really, really did well. In fact, she still continues to do really, really well. So those are some notes on weaknesses and accepting that we have them and letting them go. And lastly, I love quotes. Leaders all around the world are thinking about empowerment these days, and there is no more effective way to empower people than to see each person in terms of his or her strengths. And that is that. I'm going to stop share. Any questions, comments, insults? No. Oh, let me look in the chat box.
Bless you.
You seem to have stopped. Oh, you know what? I don't know why my video stopped. Someone asked that. I don't know why. Kimberly recommends. Okay, that's funny. All right. Does anybody have any questions or comments, or would like to share any experiences around strengths?
She got off.
Well, I'll be vulnerable, and something that I've challenged with in my last 2 career moves is really recognizing that my strengths weren't being utilized and it wasn't the right places for me. So it's tough to recognize that because you really want to try to sit in there and keep going. And it just, as Maggie has shared, it just does you a disservice as well as others. So really try to pay attention to that and help your team members when you see them struggling, and really try to help them align with their strengths.
Thank you. I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of colleges and universities doing this, and I can't emphasize enough. And there's also a kid's version of this, but the first time I did this with my daughter, she was in high school, and I did the one that was for that age group. And kids right now are really struggling, with depression and not feeling their value. And I would love to see this tool, be used in schools, in colleges, in more colleges and universities. I have 2. Do any of you know who Marianne Mealy is? Marianne Millie, okay. She used to be the president of R&R Partners, and she's my cousin, and she's a powerful woman, strong woman. And her daughter, two of her daughters had went to strengths-based colleges. My other niece went to, Chapman, and one of the colleges had, were strengths-based. And, it gives these kids something to focus on about, that's good about them, right? Because so many people just all I hear is what's bad about them.
Yeah, boost their confidence.
Yeah.
That's absolutely a great idea.
And it's a tool they can use to, and my daughter's been incredibly successful at this. She had a job interview the other day, and I said, and she really wants this job. And I said, you read your report, your top 5 before you go in there. You remind yourself of your power and your edge. And you speak that language when you talk to them. And she said it just went fantastic. And that's not the only reason why. I mean, she's fantastic. What can I say? She's fantastic. But anyway, it's just an amazing tool, and I'm so passionate about it. Clearly.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm a small business owner and we have a really small staff. So if we have someone who has a weakness, that's really hard sometimes to overcome, because we really have to have 100% from them. How do we help that person overcome that weakness, even though we might talk to them and ask them, you really need to focus on this particular area, and it always seems to be right out of their grasp to
So
do that.
You won't overcome a weakness. You can only manage a weakness. So it's about developing strategies to make sure that person can be successful in that role. And sometimes, and this is one of the things I learned as a leader, is sometimes you have to say, you know what, I'm going to take that off your plate and give it to this person who's really good at that, but they're not good at this. So I'm going to give you that, of kind of making those kinds of, approaching employees as a one size fits all and everybody has to perform at the exact same level at every task is a futile mission. You really need to understand, like, whatever this person is, if it's whatever this area where they have a weakness is, if it's communication, it's very unlikely they're going to become an excellent communicator. Can they get better? Just like the people who read 50 words per minute and went to 90 words per minute? Yes, they can get better. But they're never going to get energy from it. They're never going to be highly successful from it. And that's really important. If people are in a role where part of what they're doing is draining, they might not be in the right role. They most assuredly are not in the right role, when it starts sucking the life out of you. So a lot of times it's just sitting down, honestly, Rosemary, and having conversations with people, real conversations about, what would you do more of if you didn't have, and this is one of the questions on the 5 clues of talents. If you had nothing on your calendar for the week, no deadlines, whatever, what is it that you would choose to do? It's a really good question to ask. And you may find, another thing that sometimes leaders do is they hire the same person. They hire 5 of the same people, right? Which means their productivity isn't going to improve. They don't have a good mix. Sometimes leaders are afraid of diversity in approach. And diversity in the way people problem solve and think and approach and view the world is really, really critical. In fact, it's becoming so critical in the workplace, regardless of the size of an organization.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I have a thought I'd like to share. Am I the only guy here, by the way?
But Dan, I shouted out on you.
You did shout out to me. It's so great to see you. The people have innate talents. They have talents that, as you say, they're kind of born with these talents, but sometimes they get put in the back burner when they start to mature and they have to go into a business or they have to go into another line of work, and they don't realize that, correct me if I'm wrong, and you may have found this also, they don't utilize those natural born gifts to adapt them to the current job or the current area where they're working, and yet it's still there. Have you found that? And I may throw this to everyone, if that's the case with yourselves or with people who you're working with. Be interesting to find that out, because we all have those innate talents, but sometimes we put them away.
Well, because we take advantage, we not take advantage of them, we take them for granted.
Yeah.
We don't realize what a powerful tool they are for our success. You know, a caveat to that is if I went from what I do to working in an accounting firm, I would most likely not be successful unless my role was HR or talent development, right? Because those are talent development is my bailiwick, and organizational development is. But if I had to sit down and crunch numbers all day, I would die inside every day. So I think you have to be cognizant of that. And I think one of the things that I think a few people on this call are kind of at a point in their lives where they're thinking, what do I really want to do? What is really going to bring me joy? And you know, a lot more people are going through that right now because of the amount of reflection we've all done during COVID. But yeah, I think it's about learning how to flex your muscle, learning how to dial things up when you need to and dial them down when they work against you.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much. If anybody else doesn't have anything, we'll click off.
Maggie, thank you so much.
Oh, it's so nice. We must get
Wealth of wisdom.
Bye, Maggie.
I hope you all got something out of it.
You sure did.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.